Good afternoon, Pastor. I'm so thankful that you've given me the honor and the time to be able to take this interview with you today. Can you please begin by stating your name and your current leadership position?
My name is Chris Brothers, and I'm the youth pastor at CT Church in San Antonio.
Great. How did you get into leadership?
Um, so I went to SAGU, and really and truly, SAGU is not the only answer to getting into ministry. As much as I loved my time there, it's not. Really, it's just about serving and being willing and open to go where God has called you to go. Um, and so I got into leadership just by just being what I feel like is being obedient to the
Mhm.
Lord and just saying, "All right, Lord, like, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do?" And from there, the Lord's just opened up doors and done different things of that nature
So
to
you
put
weren't
me on
actually
that.
seeking um, to be a pastor when you were younger then?
I mean, I felt called to be a youth pastor. I mean, I always knew I wanted to be a youth pastor since the age of 15. I knew that that's where God called me to be. Uh, but as far as like seeking out a certain position or whatever it was, I was just kind of like, all right, Lord, like, I'm just going to let you open that door.
Awesome.
And he opened that door coming out of Sagu, and then we were at a church for only about a year and a half, and the Lord opened the door to come here to CT, and we've been here for going on 8 years.
Very good. What are your professional and personal challenges in leadership?
Um, Professional is, man, what would I say my professional challenges are? Uh, Sometimes being taken seriously
Mm,
in some aspects, being taken seriously, actually feeling like I have a voice that is being heard. That is a challenge. But also showing the maturity in some instances to have that voice.
I married it.
I think a lot of the times, especially as I've kind of gotten a little bit older, I've realized that there was a time where I said to myself, like, I have this position, so I have to be heard. But I don't think that's the case every time. Sometimes we're in leadership positions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have all the answers and we know everything. We know what to do.
Yeah.
We have to learn through things. We've got to grow through things, um, experiences, instances where, hey, you know what? You got to learn. You got to figure it out and do it. And so the kind of the opposite side of not having not necessarily always feeling like you have a voice is the side of like, hey, like maybe I just don't have that voice, you know,
Mm.
because sometimes you're just new to it, and as I've been in the longer I've been in leadership, I've learned like, okay, here's what I need to do essentially to have that voice. It's not just going to be given to me. You kind of have to earn to
Yeah.
have that voice. You have to show like, hey, you have the maturity,
Right.
you have the understanding to be able to kind of step in and fill that role. It's not just you have your ordination or you got your shagu diploma. You're good to go. You're automatically
Mhm.
going to be have a voice and going to be listened
Right.
to. That's not always the case.
So how much do you think age has to play with that, or not at all?
I think it definitely has its place where people do say, hey, like, you're in your mid 20s.
Right.
There's a lot of things you haven't experienced yet, you haven't gone through, you don't quite understand fully. But that's not to say in every situation that's the case. Um, because age, it can have a play, but it also might not. There is the gift of wisdom
Yeah.
that I believe is more so in other people than
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
And I think God definitely takes a play and definitely has a goal for that, and so in some people, like, yeah, they're in their mid-20s, but man, they've just been given the gift of having that extra amount of wisdom, you know and it shows. And then
Yes.
in some, it's like, hey, like, they have to learn, they've got to kind of experience that wisdom, experience the moments in life so that they gain that wisdom.
I love that. That's another perspective different from the other people that I've interviewed because they have been much more mature. So hearing your perspective as someone who's come out of the university is kind of gives a new twist to that, because I've heard a lot of young people that do graduate from SAGU and they're like, I can't find a job because they
Yeah.
medically assume I got ordained. Now people are just supposed to be like knocking at my door.
Yeah.
And
It's not the case.
yeah, that's really hard. So what about personal? What are your personal challenges in leadership?
Um, being relational, being open can definitely be some challenges in leadership that, especially, serving in a church, there's certain things that I'm just not going to have those conversations with
Mm,
people that go to the same church as me,
yeah,
you know. If I'm frustrated with my leadership or whatever the case may be, I'm going to take it to the Lord, but when I really need to vent it, I'm not going to take it to someone in the church.
that's good.
um, because that's not going to give them a good sight of my pastors and my leadership. Um, and so for personally in leadership, that's something that people I don't know if they quite understand. Like there are lines to be drawn in a way.
Right.
I think that you have to be personable and you need to just be open and honest with people. It's not to say to completely hide yourself and shield who you are
Right.
from the people that you are leading. You need to be able to have those just open, sit down, sitting around a fire conversations, talking about life, everything else.
Yeah.
Um, but there are some boundaries that have to be set because I have to protect my leadership at
Right.
the same time.
So that actually demonstrates quite quite a lot of maturity in your case, being able to balance that communication. So, what are the most significant rewards in leadership for you, or reward the most significant reward in leadership?
My most significant reward is to watch people understand and to begin to walk in the gifts that God's given them. To have that moment of just like, okay, I can do this. And they do it
Right.
without being necessarily told what to do and how to do it. It's just like, hey, can you do this? And they're just like, yeah, I can do this. And they kind of step into their own little bit of leadership in
Yeah.
what they're doing and what the gifts that they have the ability to. One of them is one of our students, Dari.
Mhm.
She does not love to lead worship. She doesn't. She hates it. She's like, I really don't see myself as a worship leader, but I feel called to play in a band. I feel called to worship and to be a part. Um, but she's also willing to lead our youth band right now. She is the leader, and she's willing to use the gifts that God's given her to kind of step into that role. Um, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah.
And I've seen different students and adults throughout the years kind of begin to understand what their gifts are, and then able to actually put them into practice.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's very significant and similar to across the board. No matter what the age of the leader is, that I kind of get what they're doing, making an impact on someone else is their greatest reward. So that's really good. Um,
But,
Besides God and your wife, who do you turn to when you need to seek counsel?
I have a couple buddies. When it comes to you know frustrations and such like that within the church, I've got a couple buddies I turn to that are both in ministry. They understand the church. They understand the different roles, what it looks like to have a pastor. Your pastor and your boss are both the same person, and what that looks like. And so I've got a couple buddies. I've got two buddies that I call that one of them I've been friends literally since the day he came out because I'm a year older than him.
Right.
And the other one, we went to the same youth group as teenagers, and then we went to SAGU together at the same time. We were roommates all throughout our time at SAGU, and they were both best men in my wedding. So there I turned to for counsel as far as stuff within the church, stuff like that. And other than that, I talk to my dad a lot. Call him. He's been in and around the church, but he's also a lover of the Lord,
Amen. Amen.
and he serves the Lord, and he's someone I go to regularly.
So when you mentioned this, the pastor that came out, you meant came out of school, correct?
Yeah, my buddy.
Right.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
he's
I
actually a
just want to
mission.
make sure that it's clear to everyone when you said came out. That's all.
Oh, yeah. Came out when we both came out of SAGU.
Right. Right. Okay.
He's actually a
So,
missionary, so yeah.
what is the most important thing to avoid as a leader, in your opinion?
Most important thing to avoid, um, moral failures. That's a big one to
Yeah.
avoid. That'll destroy your reputation really quick. But also, uh, stepping over your boundaries, having your boundaries, but then allowing those lines to be blurred a little bit. Um, know your boundaries, keep your boundaries. If you don't allow yourself, I know one big thing for me is I try not to allow myself to be alone with a woman.
Right. That's smart.
I some people say, hey, that's being sexist, whatever it is, and I'm like, nah, I think it's wise.
Yes, I agree.
You just avoid all views of evil.
Right.
In any cases, you don't want to start rumors or anything
Right.
like that. So if you're not doing it, you avoid that. But like that's a boundary for me. And so one of the things I try to do the most is I avoid crossing that boundary.
I understand. And
Um,
there's so many ways to be professionally engaged with someone of the opposite sex without having to meet with them alone. So I
yeah, exactly.
completely agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
well, especially when, youth leaders and things like that, people in the church in general, if it's a woman talking to me, or I don't necessarily say no to conversations or no to, giving advice or counsel,
Right.
whatever you want to call it, or just talking through things. But we're not in a room alone or in a building alone by ourselves. It's, hey,
Right.
there are people around. They know where we're
Right.
at. They know what's going on, or they're standing in the same room, just
Right.
on the opposite end, kind of thing.
Exactly.
So yeah,
So how important is mentoring to you?
mentoring is incredibly important. Um, I've learned that there's certain seasons of life where it can be a little more difficult to really invest in that mentorship. Um, but it's a part of raising up the next generation. It's a part of teaching them and showing them the good and the bad.
Right.
Um, and they need to see, the next generation needs to see. They need to see all the great things. They need to see all the fun things. They need to see all the things that make ministry enjoyable. They make all the things following Christ enjoyable. But they also need to understand that like it's hard. It's
Yeah.
not always easy, and they need to see both sides of it. And so when it comes to mentoring, you've got to be able to show both sides. You've got to let them see, hey, life's a struggle.
Yeah.
You get through it with the Lord's strength.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
So personally, are you being mentored at this time?
Yes and no.
Okay. Can you
Part of
elaborate?
that. Part of that's kind of on me
Mm-hmm.
in a way of just making time for it,
Yeah.
and having time for it.
Yeah.
Uh, but and I haven't necessarily sought it out in the way that I think I should be
Yeah.
seeking it out. But got great pastors, great leadership here at the church that are always giving opportunities. Um, not just opportunities to do things, but opportunities to discuss and talk through and understand what's going on, what we're doing, why we're doing it, kind of stuff like that.
That's good. And in addition, are you mentoring someone?
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
Is that a student or someone
It's an
outside of? Okay.
intern here at the
Very
church.
good. Very
Yeah,
good.
well, these things.
Yeah. So how do you separate your personal time from ministry? How do you make it a priority?
Um, put my phone away.
You or you're never on
I'm always on my
It's a
phone.
good
I
yeah.
just ignore things. I've gotten pretty good at ignoring things. I used to not, but now it's just kind of like, hey, with the fam, I'm putting that away.
Mm,
Um, there's times where you can always make an excuse to say, oh, it's ministry, I get to do it, but then you realize that your family suffers for that.
yeah.
I know there was a time where playing video games was a lot of fun. I was playing games with students. I was building relationships, and relationships that I mean really kind of took off because of playing video
Listening.
games. You know,
Right.
but then I also realized that my my family and I we were busy,
Mhm.
and spending time with my wife was just alone time together, just just us was
Right.
becoming less and less because I was, hey, I'm spending time with students. Well, it was just an excuse
Right.
to play video games, But I realized like, oh wait, this is hurting. So I've like
Yeah.
cut off the video games. And the students even say like, dude, you don't get on anymore. I'm like, yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
And so, but the priorities change, and
Right.
so you have to take time to have a personal life because even outside of the ministry, we are people.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
And I think it's wonderful how you mentioned because it is a tool. That's a tool with the new generation that you're able to use technology, whether it is social media, whether it is video games. It's quite different in your generation than maybe in some of the older generations. And in order to transition the church, I think that being able to use those platforms are wonderful. It's just a matter of, like you said, balancing the two. So,
yeah. And now I talk with my, hey, you cool if I play video games with, we're gonna play,
yeah,
we're gonna play a little bit.
yeah,
Uh, and she's like, yeah, absolutely, go play, whatever.
yeah,
But it's because we're spending that time together.
right. And
So
I could
now on those
personally
extra
see,
those
I
extra
could,
nights, it's like, hey,
mhm,
yeah,
yeah. And I personally see the fruit of that when you do are able to spend that extra time. So,
yeah.
what do you feel has brought you the most success and growth in your ministry?
What do I feel has brought me the most success and growth? Um, Delegating. That has been a big one. It's been something I've struggled with, and you guys know this. I still struggle with delegating. Y'all know this from personal experience. But that's one thing that I feel like has helped is, and not to say delegating is just giving other people's job and having less to do,
Mm,
but bringing other people in and
mm,
giving them responsibilities,
right,
and allowing them to use their gifts and their creativity, and how they, their things of design and whatever it may be, has not only seen growth in the people I'm ministering to, but also allowed me to focus on other things that I really should be focusing on that I wasn't because I was filling up my time with other things, with things that I really didn't need to do, nor do I have the greatest gift to do.
right.
And giving those things to people who, hey, they're able to do that. I can let them focus on that, and I can focus on this stuff.
So why do you think you if it's something that's difficult for you, the delegation, personal, as you personally evaluate yourself, why do you think delegation is difficult?
Because I do it best.
Huh? Oh,
Because I do it best.
because you feel that you're gonna be able to do it better. Okay, that's
Oh
good.
yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Because you think but I think it's something natural. I think we think of the way we want it to think, and when we dream about things, and we want it to look a certain way and have a certain feel to it, and sometimes you're afraid that those people, anyone else, they're not going to give it that certain feel to it. They're
right,
going to have their spin on it. And you kind of just have to say, you know what? It's not about every little thing being the exact way I want it. It's about other people using their gifts and talents and creativity and making it something that really and truly turns out better every time it happens.
that's good.
Um, and so just kind of giving over the fact that it's like, yeah, I might think I do it better, but I don't always do it better. Other people have better gifts and better talents than I do, and allowing people to use those.
Very good. What advice would you give women wanting to go into ministry?
Just do it. Don't let other people tell you you can't. Um, just do it. Just be obedient to the Lord, what He's calling you to do, and send in the application. Apply whatever it is. Step into it. Say, "Hey, I'm willing to speak up and do this," and not allow other people to hold you back.
Do you think that there has been a transition from your generation to maybe some of the older generations? Or do you think it's still kind of the same mentality for many years of people not wanting women in ministry?
I think there's a definite shift, um, in women being in ministry from the different generations.
Right.
You compare. I'm technically a millennial. I don't like to identify as a millennial, but I'm technically a millennial. You look at our generation compared to, say, the boomer generation,
Mm. Yeah.
um, baby boomer generation, not the boomers. Sorry,
Yeah.
baby boomer generation, and there's a definite transition
Oh, yeah.
between the two generations. Definitely
Absolutely.
something different happening.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways, it's being felt, and it's not. I don't think in a lot of ways. I think it is being felt throughout the entire church,
Right,
and some people just have a hard stance against it,
right.
just their views and the way
Mm,
that they read and they
mhm.
choose to interpret scripture. They have a very hard stance against it.
Right,
Um, with women being in, the leadership role.
right.
You hear people all the time. I'm okay with women being kids pastors. I'm
Mhm.
okay with women being youth pastors. But once women get into the some more associate and the lead pastor role is when they're like,
Right,
they're okay with it until that point.
right. Okay,
Um, and so I mean, I see the shift happening
yeah.
with women being more empowered to step into those roles. Um, but yeah,
I think what you mentioned about the different roles and that people feel okay, that it's important for women to see different opportunities to minister and not just the traditional ways. There's
right.
so many different ways, which is something I'm learning a lot in school and in
Yeah,
my life, that you don't have to be the pastor, you don't have to be the associate pastor. There's so many, like I'm involved with compassion ministry.
yeah,
So many other opportunities where you can minister instead of that. And not to say that I think there's anything wrong with women doing that, but I thank you for sharing that. That means a lot. Okay. Now, in closing, is there anything that you would like to share about ministry, your life, or anything?
no, not necessarily. Not a thought in my head that I'm just like, oh, I got to share this.
Yeah.
Um, be obedient.
Yes.
Don't wait for someone else to do it for you. Just the Lord's calling you to it. Just step into that. It looks scary sometimes, but you just gotta. Lord doesn't ask us to look at the end of the bridge. He asks us to just take it step by step.
Amen.
And
Thank you for
so,
your words of wisdom. Thank you for giving me another perspective by being able to interview someone that's kind of new, although you haven't been really new, but this younger in the ministry gives me a whole new perspective. And I appreciate your time, Pastor.
yep.